Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Mm.
We're diving into some fascinating research that you've been looking into
Okay.
about how people view adopted kids.
Yeah.
And for this, we are going all the way back to 1999
Okay.
to a study in the Journal of Social Psychology by Mulcair and Guinness,
A Guinness.
like the beer.
Like the beer. Yeah.
And this study looked at how people perceive adopted kids,
Right.
semi-adopted kids. And by that, they mean kids who were conceived using sperm donation
Oops.
and non-adopted children.
Okay.
So like 3 different groups.
Yeah, it's a fascinating comparison, isn't it? I mean, comparing these different family types helps us unpack, are there negative views about adopted children specifically?
Right.
Or is it something else, something more about just societal norms or expectations about family structure?
Yeah. Are we
Yeah.
just like reacting to something that's different?
Yeah, exactly.
Or is it really about adoption?
Yeah.
So what did this study find?
Well, one of the really interesting things was they didn't actually find an overall negative bias against adopted children.
That's kind of surprising. You always hear those like anecdotal stories.
You do, right?
Yeah.
But this research really challenges that.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember this study focused on college students.
Okay.
So that's a group that you might expect to be a little bit more open-minded,
Right.
perhaps less likely to hold those traditional biases.
Yeah.
Also, this study looked at a very specific scenario.
Okay.
And that might not really reflect how people view adopted children in everyday life.
Okay, so tell me about the scenario. Like, what were they looking at?
Well, the researchers, they presented a story about a child who, let's just say, took a snowball fight a little too far.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so they packed a sharp piece of ice into a snowball and threw it at another child, causing a pretty bad cut.
Okay, yeah, that's not good sportsmanship.
Not at all. Oh.
So basically, they wanted to see if knowing that the child was adopted or semi-adopted or non-adopted, if that would affect how people viewed what they did.
Exactly. And, while there wasn't really a clear overall bias against adopted kids,
Yeah.
there was one group that really stood out.
Oh, okay, this is where it gets juicy.
Tell me, who was it?
Women in the study, they rated semi-adopted children significantly less favorably than non-adopted children.
Oh, wow. So is that just women being harsher overall?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
This finding might actually point to some deeper societal biases about how families are formed, particularly those involving reproductive technology.
Okay.
Remember, this was 1999
Right.
when sperm donation was still relatively new.
Yeah, so were attitudes towards sperm donation and infertility different back then?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Back in 99, there may have been some lingering stigma or discomfort surrounding sperm donation.
Okay.
It challenged those traditional notions of fatherhood and family,
I see.
and that's where this gender difference in perception might come into play.
Okay, so how so?
Well, think about it from the perspectives of men and women.
Okay.
For men, artificial insemination might have been seen as a way to preserve virility. There's still the father, even if not biologically.
Okay.
But for women,
Yeah.
it could have raised more complex questions about motherhood,
Right.
genetics,
Yeah.
societal expectations.
Oh, that's a really good point.
So, back then, women may have felt more pressure to conform to traditional ideas about family and motherhood.
Okay, so you're saying that might have colored how they saw kids conceived through sperm donation.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Right.
not about being consciously judgmental or anything. It's
Right.
more those unconscious biases that we all have,
Yeah, those things that just sort of seep in from the world around us.
Right, exactly.
So this wasn't a big overall negative thing towards adopted kids.
Right.
But there was this extra layer of complexity when it came to semi-adopted kids.
Yeah, and how women viewed them.
Do you think this difference in perception could have, real-world consequences for these kids? It's definitely something to think about, especially when you consider that a lot of elementary school teachers are women.
Oh, that's true.
So, if these unconscious biases are there, could it subtly influence how these kids are treated, even at a young age?
Yeah, like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Exactly.
If they're treated differently because of their family structure, could that actually shape how they develop and what opportunities they have?
Precisely.
Hmm.
It really underlines how important it is to recognize and address these unconscious biases
Yeah,
to make sure that all children, regardless of their background, get a fair chance.
absolutely. So this deep dive showed us that while there wasn't this big negative bias against adopted kids overall,
Uh,
there was this hidden layer of complexity with semi-adopted children and how women perceived them.
right.
And that's a big takeaway for anyone who wants to make the world a fairer and more inclusive place for all kids.
It is. And it makes you wonder, how these perceptions might have changed over time, especially with how much reproductive technology and family structures have evolved.
That's true.
Yeah.
Back in '99, sperm donation was still kind of a new thing.
Right.
Now we have IVF, surrogacy egg donation, so many ways to build a family.
Exactly.
So given all these changes, are those old stigmas fading, or are we seeing new ones pop up? Something for you, our listeners, to ponder.
Definitely. A fascinating question that invites us to examine our own assumptions and think about how we can create a more inclusive and accepting society for all families and children.
Well said. So to sum up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we saw that while there wasn't a clear overall bias against adopted children,
Right.
the study did find this interesting gender difference in how people saw semi-adopted children.
Yeah.
And that might reflect those deeper societal anxieties about family and reproductive technology. Makes you think, huh, like with all the advancements we've seen, are we actually becoming more accepting of all these different families?
It's a good question. Are we becoming more accepting, or are we just dealing with a whole new set of biases?
Yeah,
Right.
it'd be really interesting to see the same study done today. Like, how have things changed in the last 25 years?
Have those anxieties about different family structures gone away, or are they still there under the surface?
Yeah. And it's something we can all think about, in our own lives.
Right.
What kind of conversations have we had about family? Have we noticed any biases or assumptions?
That's that.
It's a chance to really look at our own beliefs
Yeah.
and see if they match up with what we say we value, inclusivity and acceptance.
I think awareness is really that first step to making a real change.
Yeah.
Once we see our own biases, then we can start to challenge those old societal norms
Right.
and create a world that's more welcoming for all children, no matter how their families came to be.
I love that. That's a great point to end on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure diving into this with you.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. And thanks to all of you for listening to this deep dive into societal perceptions and families.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. It's given us a lot to think about.
I hope.
And we hope it's given you something to think about, too.
Keep those brains buzzing.
Keep those brains buzzing. Until next time, keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.